Police have made dramatic arrests, arresting about 17 people across Europe on suspicion of planning ISIS-linked terrorist attacks. In fact, Italy's chief terrorism official said this was the most important international police operation in Europe in 20 years. Joining us from some perspective and analysis is CBN's terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck. So, Eric, who are these 17 suspects and where did they come from?
You know, George, it all centers around a cleric in Norway, of all places. His name is Mulla Krekar. Now, he is right now in a Norwegian prison, but he's a guy who has led for years, really, George. People have been wanting him deported from Norway for years back to Iraq, where he's originally from. For years, he's been connected to al-Qaeda, accused of terrorism links. Now, apparently, he was at the head of this ring really stretching throughout the continent of Europe from Britain, Italy, Greece, Finland, Norway, and beyond. Big ring. 17 people arrested today, as you mentioned in the lead-in. But the centerpiece of this ring was Mulla Krekar from Norway.
And what were they planning to do, Eric?
Well, what they were doing, George, was two things. Number one, recruiting people, recruiting aspiring jihadists in Europe to go to Iraq and Syria, either to join ISIS or join the al-Qaeda-linked al-Nusra Front, which operates in Syria. That's number one. Number two, they were ultimately training these fighters, or recruiting these fighters, mostly online, to wage jihad against the Kurds. In Iraq, in northern Iraq, George, as you know, Kurdistan, the Kurds basically control that large region in northern Iraq, and ISIS does not like the Kurds. They're battling right now in Iraq and Syria. So ultimately, what Mulla Krekar and this ring of his throughout Europe wanted to do was to take on the Kurds. That was their long-term goal in Iraq.
And how effective has ISIS's strategy been of cultivating homegrown soldiers within Europe's borders, and especially using the internet, online social media, Twitter, Facebook, to recruit?
Very effective. The recruiting end of it, George, highly effective. Now, once these guys get to the battlefield in Syria and Iraq, it's not clear how effective they all are. But in terms of recruiting them, they have been very successful. At least 5,000 Europeans from France, Germany, Britain, Denmark, etc., George, have left their comfortable homes in Western Europe, traveled to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS. So ISIS has had great success in recruitment, particularly on the web, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. They're all over the web. But also here in America, George, our viewers should know, I'm sitting in D.C. right now. Right here a few weeks ago, the House Homeland Security Committee released a report saying that at least 250 U.S. citizens have left America, gone over there to join ISIS, and dozens of them, according to this report by the House Homeland Security Committee, have already returned to the United States.
And these arrests in Europe, by the way, have reportedly come as ISIS is threatening to launch attacks in Russia for Russia's role in Syria. What do you make of these new threats by ISIS?
Yeah, I think it's legit, George, for a few reasons. Number one, obviously, Russia right now is aligned with Iran and Hezbollah in Syria, and they're carrying out at least some bombing raids against ISIS targets. So Russia is actively fighting against ISIS in Syria. Number two, if you look at southern Russia, that restless Caucasus region, George, that is a hotbed for ISIS and al-Qaeda activity. Russia, for the past 2 decades, really, has had major problems in that Caucasus region, Chechnya, Dagestan. So that's another launching pad for attacks against Russia. And we've even seen some attacks in previous years in Moscow and kind of in Russia Central. So this is a big threat. And obviously, the airliner that went down recently, George, over Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, a Russian airliner, it looks like that was a bomb planted on board that plane by ISIS. No concrete confirmation yet, but it sure looks that way.
Okay, fantastic. As always, Eric Stakelbeck, our terrorism analyst out of our Washington, D.C. bureau. As always, sir, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you, George.